Without further ado, sorry I'm a little bit late. Just one of those days, but that's fine. For those of you just tuning in, I am currently reading, doing like a novel reading, and I'm doing chapter by chapter each day, one chapter. And what I'm reading right now is called The Sword and the Rose. It's one of my father's manuscripts. This is my first time ever reading it. I haven't read any of it all the way through, so I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to end. None of that. So basically it'll be you and me reading along. I'm going to be marking down places where things need to be edited. And you get a story, I get to edit my work, and we're all happy. So I'm on chapter 15 right now. So without further ado, chapter 15. Gwalstor and Forraith were holding one of their regular planning sessions in the Baron's hall. Forraith had a ring, a small silver circlet, which he was twiddling on the tabletop as he talked. You be sure you want to send one more knight and 10 men to Gwillow's Hole, Lord? Why so doubtful, Forraith? All I wish to do is to signify to Wardick that I have more men this year, if he wishes to try any conclusions with me. Forraith twiddled the ring absently, slipping it on and off a finger. But there be other significations, Lord. How come we be having the extra men to be sending? Because by scraping and scrimping, we got the barony on its feet again, and it be a prosperous barony. So despite the losses in the rebellion, when fighting men laid off in other places come wandering through here, we can offer to hire someone and replace a bit of what we lost. And at least 2 of the knights we've taken on have come from the king's own service. And that would signify that the king is cutting back on his own army, which signifies whatever sort of help the king would send in the case of a fight with Wardick, it won't be his army. And Wardick will read all these significations, won't he? Gwalstor had been so involved in listening to the changes in Forraith's accent that he nearly missed the question. I see. We need to send enough men to let Wardick know that we can defend ourselves, but few enough to allow ourselves to have enough men to handle Tostig and his people in Lusmore? What do you suggest? No less than 2 knights and 15 men, Lord. Even with Marquian ready to back them up if necessary? Forraith frowned, tapping his ring lightly on the table. Lord, I mislike being the one to say this, but it frights me some to have you away in the Lusmore and Marquian Darharvalant free and armed. Even with his sister as a guest in your castle, Lord. He served well last fall. And last fall you were here in the castle, Lord, able to rouse your forces against him should he attempt anything. This spring, you'll be away in Lusmore and hard to reach with a message, while he'll be over the far end of the barony with his own force. Your recommendation? Set another to watching your eastern border, and take Marquian along with you into the Lusmore. Melgothop spoke up. He's right, my Lord Baron. Best keep that one under your eyes. Even then, he might do seriously bad things to you, but less likely when you're not watching closely. Gwalstor tapped his cuff, then nodded. I'll take your advice on that then. Get the preparations in train, Marshal Forraith, and we will deal with Lusmore as quick as may be. Yes, Lord. Marshal put a hand on the table, preparing to heave himself to his feet. Gwalstor suddenly asked a question that had been bothering his mind. Forraith, that ring, is this something you won from someone in dice? Forraith reddened. No, Lord. There be a young lady, daughter of a merchant in leather goods. She and her father and me, we've come to an understanding. I be needing your permission first, but... Gwalstor laughed loudly. And you were waiting and never quite finding the right time? Right? Well, we must see to this. It never hurts to have an alliance with a merchant, though. I should meet the lady and her father before making any firm decisions. Shall we make the arrangement for about the time of the midsummer feast? That would be a good time for such beginnings. For certain, Lord, and thank you. The marshal retired quickly, leaving Gwalsor smiling after him. Small candles flickered again in Brennan's chamber, casting their dancing yellow light over the room. How soon will he be back then? No, don't try to answer that. I know you can't say. It depends too much on marching times, how many fights are fought, and the like. Salder's tears. I'm sounding like a naive young maiden, seeing her young love off to battle for the first time. Not like the mother of a 13-year-old boy. Gwalsor sat quiet. There was a little he could say. He knew. Rebecca had promised to take care, but a campaign was not a simple matter. There were too many possibilities for death or injury, ranging from falling from a startled horse to a stray arrow in some skirmish. He finally spoke tentatively. I will try to be careful. Just the kind of thing he'd already discarded as unhelpful. Of course you will. You'll be riding at the head of your men, a good target for all and each. He looked down at the floor. There are things that must be done and things I must do. I know, and were you to do any less, you would not be the man I love. I'm not angry with you, Gwalsor. I'm angry at this world which bids fair to take from me every man I find myself caring for. He looked up. I feel helpless here because there's nothing I can say. She smiled, but he could see that she was forcing it. No, she said, I'm being cruel to you by making your last evening here so miserable. Come hold me and say nothing. The road to Lesmore led through the dark fields where the dark-clad peasants were out finishing off putting in the crops for the year. Copses and forests were green, grass on haymows and pastures were growing, and the long line of marching troops shimmered and twinkled with the sunlight reflected from their burnished metal. Marquis and Darhavalent, in a black mood, met them on the way as planned. As part of his demonstration of opposition, he had not brought the requested complement of men. He had judged the size of his force nicely. It was sufficiently not large enough to rank disobedience, but not large enough to be as useful as it ought to be. He saluted the Baron and then spoke. Bandits, my Lord Baron? You take me off hunting bandits? Bandits are irrelevant. They are sufficiently numerous and well fortified that we need a full force to roust them out. So why do we not send in a few of our knights with some archers? Surely men of rank need not bother with this nonsense. Gwalsor tapped his finger on his leather cuff, then spoke. Perhaps it is just that we do things a little differently in the north. I learnt my first lessons of war following my father as he rode his barony, rousting out and destroying bandits, and it never seemed to bother him that protecting his people from them was below his dignity. That being the case, you will bear with me while I follow my father's teaching until such a time as I find a better custom. Marquis Darhavalent silently bobbed his head, displeasure plain on his face. After Darhavalent had gone to see to the ordering of his men in the column, Gwalsor felt Malgalthop's presence at his shoulder. Malgalthop muttered, Trouble, Lord. Even here under my eye? I'll not wager against it. We have winter for to make plans. He'll maybe arrange plans to start work when we're all out in the swamp, where messages won't come easy. He knows why he's with you, almost like you have heralds with trumpets announcing that you do not trust him, and he doesn't like it. It might make him mad enough to start something. Gwalsor looked grim. I hope not. As you say, we'll be out of touch. Just the time for some scoundrel to do something villainous. Well, you leave good people in charge at the castle. Gwalsor nodded. He thought for a moment to send a message back to warn the castle, then shook his head. They knew the risks back there, even the risk of an uprising while he was away, and he had no more certain knowledge now than he had when he had left. To send them back a warning with no real justification would only serve to make them feel he thought them unequal to their task. No, They would either succeed or they would fail. If they failed, he would have to deal with that in its time. 2 days after the force left Grendel Castle, they came in sight of the Hold Castle. It was a motte and bailey structure, the fort built on top of an artificial hill rising out of the plain. During the whole of the march, Marquis and Darharelevant had had little conversation with Gwalsor, nor had Gwalsor sought out the Nightholder. Commands and acknowledgments had passed back and forth, none of them which made Gwalsor feel less concerned about the situation. However, seeking Marquian out could do little but confirm to him that his baron did not trust him. Having finally arrived to the foot of the hill on which the castle stood, the army set up camp. There was room within the castle, but not for a force of this size, and in any case, Gwalsor thought it better not to have the men in barracks for a day, 2 at most, then pull them all out for another march. For those of the rank of knight, the matter was different. It would be a discourtesy, even an insult, for the baron to refuse the hospitality of the Nightholder, even though the Nightholder was still acting in incapacity. Since Gwalsor was to stay in the castle, it was a slight to require the knights to stay in the camp. All the knights moved up to the castle, and therefore there was a dinner to welcome them, which meant that no business to speak of was done that evening. Pardordar and Esquick showed little more nervousness this time. Still Nightholder in name, though not yet announced as permanent replacement for Sir Cardell. He had to entertain not merely his baron and a small party, but his baron's whole army. For all that, he did his best not to allow his nervousness to be too obvious. At about mid-morning of the next day, they held a council in the main council chamber of the keep. Marquian was annoyed that a magician, and a commoner at that, was to have a part in the deliberations. However, he limited to the demonstration of his annoyance to the occasional frowns in the magician's direction, and affecting to forget Pemberlint's name when it came to time to speak to or about him. On his own part, Pemberlint had dealt with difficult clients enough before, and showed no concern for Marquian's attitude. He was summoned early to give his report to work. Lords, I have sufficient leisure to carry out a thorough study of approaches to the bandit hold. You have an advantage over the bandits in that there are a sufficient number of practicable paths to their den, that a watch at or near the head of each that is beyond the resources available to a band of this size. They will therefore have watches on the camp on the swamp's edge at only 1 or 2 most likely places, trusting on sentries nearer their camp, where many routes come together to form only a few. He picked up a sheet of paper. Here, then, is a diagram of the routes, with notes particularly landmarks which show the path. I have studied several copies produced, so that it may be easier studied. I hold myself in readiness to provide whatever explanations may be needed. There was a pause while the maps were passed out to those present in order of precedence. Marquian, one of the first to receive his copy, waited until they were all given out before he asked, "Do you also hold yourself in readiness, Master Pemberhask, to accompany the men who trust their lives to the accuracy of your work?" Pemberlint answered calmly, "That will be as my Lord Baron commands. I had, however, assumed that I should be going, since it was my understanding that the bandits have a magician with them, and my assistance may be needed." Marquian merely frowned and nodded a dismissal of the subject. There followed a discussion of the merits and faults of each of these routes. Was it better to march a longer distance to a place less likely to be watched, or a shorter, therefore less tiring march to a place which might be watched? One of the lesser knights, Carmath Dar Solting, spoke up in his turn. Would it not be better to catch them entirely by surprise? In which case, we ought to make the longer march. We are not likely to catch them by surprise, Gwalsor answered. I don't doubt that they already know we're coming. The question is, do we take one of the routes where we have likely marked every point on its length at which a clever ambuscade would cause us the trouble? They know we're coming? Demanded Markian. He's trying to make trouble, Gwalsor thought. No one can be so naive. Of course they know, he answered. We spent time gathering our force at Grandal, and some time marching in this direction. All they need is a man in some tavern listening to gossip. Our decision here is intended merely to take advantage of whatever surprise we can by which route we choose. My own preference would be to take the route marked with the arrow. Taking any of the others requires that we bring our army across the front of the Lessamore, where watchers stationed at one of the paths may well see us and bring back word of our intent. Either that, or we add an extra half day to our march in order to circle wide around the front of the swamp. Are there any other opinions? Yes, said Markian. Well as timidity. These are, after all, only bandits, not true warriors. Why do we not march straight in, dealing with them as we come to them? Cardar Isternal tried and was slaughtered, and along with most of his force. While we have a large enough army, I think we need not fear being wiped out. We do not have enough men to afford to spend them recklessly. I prefer to use some caution. I might use another name other than caution, muttered Markian. Gwalsor looked him in the eye. If you are suggesting what I believe you are suggesting, then I will have an apology from you, or one of us will be dead within the hour. Markian realized he'd gone a little too far, stood. My apologies, Lord Baron. I meant no slight or insult. That would not be the end of it, Gwalsor knew. But there were more important things to be dealt with than Markian Dar Hurlevant's mutterings. So, are there any further discussions? Some of the leaders quizzed Pemberland on the trail conditions, and there were deliberations on the order of march and the like. It was decided that they would march on the next morning. Well, my lord, do you still think Dar Hurlevant too useful to do away with? Gwalsor smiled grimly. Let us say that his utility is diminishing, Malga. No, do nothing to him without my orders. Next afternoon, they entered Lessamore. And that's it for this evening. Yes, I can tell that as summer comes, I'm going to be more and more pained. So bear with me. There'll be a lot more water drinking because I have fans I have to turn off, doors I have to close, and I end up becoming a hot box. But anyway, thank you for joining me, and I will talk to you tomorrow. So see you soon.